Hey friends, with all the craziness in DC right now, Patricia is snowed in. So this is going to be a solo episode. I'll make sure to ask some of the questions she wrote for our guest today. And we're really excited for you to meet our special guest. Let's jump into it.
Welcome to The Art Equation, a podcast from Now Be Here. I'm one of your hosts, Patricia Ortega, and our historian and independent curator.
I'm your other host, Kim Schoenstatt, a contemporary artist and organizer of Now Be Here, a directory of and for women and non-binary artists.
On this podcast, we have a little charla, a little bachipapo about making art and making exhibitions. We invite fellow artists, curators, archivists, and people from different areas of the art world to share their knowledge and their experience.
We are curious about what goes on in the day-to-day of arting. We want to talk shop, get in the weeds about what goes into art shows, talk with the makers and the doers of the art world. Welcome to The Art Equation. We're back with the Getty. Last episode, we realized how little we knew about what art conservators actually do. So we've invited another art conservator on the podcast to teach us more about the field. Please welcome Julie Wolfe to the podcast. Julie, we're so excited to have you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I want to start by just sharing a little bit of your bio with our listeners so that they can understand where you're coming from and some of your history.
Sure.
So you have a BFA in art history from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. You obtained an MA from Buffalo State, the State University of New York, specializing in objects conservation. You gained advanced training from the Strauss, okay, Center for Conservation and Technical Studies at Harvard Art Museums. You worked in various conservation laboratories such as the Williamstown Art Conservation Center and the Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum. You're currently a conservator at the J. Paul Getty Museum in the Decorative Arts and Sculpture Conservation Department, where you've worked since the year 2000. Happy 25th.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
On top of all of this, you just co-authored a book titled Roy Lichtenstein, Outdoor Painted Sculpture. Julie, you're nonstop.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a real milestone for me to finish that. So
I bet. It sounds like a pretty large undertaking.
yes, worked on it for many years, at least 10.
Oh my God. I had no idea. 10. That's a lot.
Yes.
I'm going to tangent for a second, but do books like that generally take 10 years? Is that sort of like the 5 to 10 year?
I have no idea. But for someone like me, who is not a writer per se, and trained to do that. Just invited to participate in a series of books at the Getty Conservation Institute. Yeah, I think it's normal for someone who has a full-time job and is kind of doing it on their spare time.
Right. So that's like a conservator's side hustle is writing books.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, okay, we had your colleagues from the Getty Research Institute, Melissa and Elise, on the podcast to talk about their work in archive conservation. You're also in conservation, but it's a little bit different. You're in sculpture conservation at the Getty Museum, not the Research Institute. It seems like different territory. Can you help us understand and expand on that?
Sure, yeah. It's kind of almost the same thing. We're all conservators. We've been trained in the same way. There aren't a whole lot of conservation training programs, so we all kind of come from the same background and training. But each institute at the Getty have their own kind of mission statements, and with the Getty Research Institute, of course, they're taking care of the archives and the library, so they have a different focus, and they really focus on giving access to the public. But the museum, we're really focused on the collection that was built up by J. Paul Getty. And so it's really focused on one collection. It's also a museum setting, so it's very active with new acquisitions, exhibitions, and really a lot of just collections care focused on, in my department, the decorative arts and sculpture.
Oh, that's really interesting. Wait, so what does a typical day look like?
Oh, it's always varied. So it depends on the schedule. We spend a lot of time preparing for exhibitions, and as a conservator, I work with a large team in the museum. We collaborate with the registrars, the designers, the curators, all to review the lists of objects that we're borrowing, help negotiate with lenders on bringing things, maybe even help advise with shipping. So a lot of work goes into just keeping focused on what objects are going to be coming to the museum for display and coming up with just a plan of action for when they arrive. One of the things about sculpture conservation is that I have to be familiar with a broad range of materials and object types. So I'll work from anything from like a piece of glass to terracotta to gilt silver, and so it's a huge array of different materials that I have to be ready to work with. Actually, one of the exciting things about exhibitions is that we never know what's coming and it's always something new. So half the time I will be familiar with what is coming and feel comfortable. And then another half of the time I will not and have to do a lot of research and figure things out.
Is there a lot of collaboration then between conservators? Like if you're tasked with an object that you're less familiar with, do you then reach out to other conservators who are more specialists on that?
Oh, absolutely. Especially if, say, a museum that we're borrowing from has a conservator, there's a lot of direct back and forth on ways to handle things. What kind of climate does it need to have? Does it need some sort of special lighting concerns and things like that? So, yeah, there's a lot of collaboration with other conservators as well.
Do you ever have a moment when you have two objects in the show and one object is like super cool with heavy light and the other object really needs to be dim, but by dimming the lights, it's hard to see the other object?
Absolutely. That is a huge challenge.
That sounds like a nightmare.
It is. It really is.
Because then you have like the exhibition designers who are like, wait, these two look fantastic next to each other.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
And then the conservator might say, nope, can't do it. Yeah, we have to consider those questions like right at the very beginning before we even borrow things, because we have to make sure that it's viable. I remember like one of the more recent shows that I worked on at the Getty was the Camille Claudel exhibition. And we borrowed, hundreds of her works.
Oh, wow.
And they were all of a medium, like either bronze or stone or plaster. And none of them really had light restrictions. So it just made everything so easy as far as display. Like the curators could really just put anything anywhere. And we even opened up the skylights, which we rarely get to do. And that's just so rare. That never happens. It was kind of divine, actually.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, having to really, you can't put a manuscript, like a medieval manuscript, next to a bronze sculpture and expect to have the same lighting conditions.
That's interesting. I mean, this is great because I get to ask all the dumb questions. But like, what's your favorite object that you've worked with?
Oh my gosh, can I say everything?
Yeah.
Yeah, but an object becomes a favorite when I've been able to have the time to really, really investigate everything about it, its history, the materials. I do have to say that working on Roy Lichtenstein's 3 brushstrokes at the Getty was one of my favorites because, it was new to the collection. It was part of the Fran and Ray Stark sculpture collection that was donated in 2007. And so the Getty suddenly had this outdoor sculpture collection that we had to suddenly integrate with the gardens in a relatively short period of time. And I think my eye was drawn to the 3 brushstrokes because of the fact that in just the initial research on it, knowing that it was going outside, it had a painted surface? How are we going to maintain that? I contacted the foundation. And from there, it just kind of led me to one thing and another. And speaking with the artist assistant, who was still active with the estate, was able to interview and find out all of these the nitty gritty about how Roy applied paint to his outdoor works and what was important to him, what was the critical requirements of getting the color correct for his works outdoors. It just became not only just interesting and sort of a deep dive into looking at the artist and his studio practice, but I also realized it was topical because the artist assistant, James de Pasquale, he was probably getting ready to retire at some point, and it was a time when I could actually take advantage of him still being really willing to speak with me and to capture all that information that actually, if I hadn't have done that, I think a lot of it would be lost right now.
Oh, interesting.
And it was the sort of thing that I think art historians had written about his works, artists knew about his work, but coming from a conservator's perspective, I was asking a lot more questions that are more nuanced that can actually help us with the future care and preservation of his works. And so I think that's why it just became my favorite. I just felt like I put so much into it.
I mean, a book.
Well, that too. Right.
And the sculpture that you're talking about, that's on the cover of the book.
Actually, it's not.
It's not. So that's a different
that's
brushstroke.
a different one. Right.
Oh my God. How many brushstrokes did he make?
Oh, quite a few. So maybe like
a whole
20,
series.
A series. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
But wait a second. So do you ever have to like remove the paint and then repaint it?
Well, unfortunately, yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Outdoor painted sculpture and just sculpture outdoors in general, they just require so much maintenance. And you know, the original surface that the artists create is just going to go away. There's no way to keep it preserved forever in an outdoor environment. You know, just too much UV light, too much rain, too much snow, temperature variations, people touching it, scratching it, whatever. So it's a harsh life for these outdoor sculptures.
And then I would think that the paint chemistry also changes because we have, you know, the old paints were probably made of things that we don't use anymore.
Exactly. So no paint is going to last forever. And the paint systems change constantly. Less so with artist materials for like indoor work. So like Roy Lichtenstein's paintings, you could still get the paints that he used, which are now the mineral spirit acrylic Golden's paints. You can still get those, right?
Amazing.
But with his outdoor paints, that's changed. And so you kind of have to come up with an equivalent, you know, something that you can get now that matches what you would have used then. Yeah, the coatings world is constantly changing and evolving and responding to mostly government restrictions on chemicals and VOCs. And so solvents are always changing. And
the government restrictions, those would be so that as the paint is basically degrading and falling off the sculpture and going into the soil, it doesn't contaminate the groundwater, or is it more human interaction? Or
oh, that's an interesting way of looking at it, actually. Yes, before the 1960s or so, lead could be used, heavy metals could be used in paints. So, of course, if those are going to fall off and get into the soil, that's not good. So a lot of the restrictions are related to what kind of pigments they may use. If they have heavy metals, those get restricted. But then it's a lot to do with solvents as well, because you have these resins to make a liquid paint that are dissolved in solvents, and those can be really damaging for the environment. They can be toxic or hazardous. And so the Environmental Protection Agency really studies that a lot and tries to make sure that there's less of that contamination and waste that happens when people use paints outdoors.
Okay, wait. I want to get back to, do you ever not repaint?
Oh, well, it's kind of cheating, but when we did repaint the Lichtenstein, I did it with the artist assistant. And we knew that if we put it back outside, it would just deteriorate and have to be repainted again. So we actually moved it inside. So that's kind of cheating.
Why is that cheating?
Well, it's kind of deferring, or it's just, I guess it's not cheating. It was just a solution. It was a way of preserving it. And, fortunately that work could be in an indoor environment and work in that setting. Large de Souvreaus or large monumental Alexander Calders, those aren't going to be something that you can repaint and then just put inside.
Yeah, like where's the cutoff in terms of like,
Yep.
it's patinaed, right? There's like the old look that needs to be preserved.
Yeah. Well, that's where the artist interviews are so important. So, for example, Alexander Calder, with his works, he had a specific palette as well, and that was using these Ronin paints. And they're very standard colors. And he even wrote about it in his biography that, if the paint starts to fade, just repaint it, slap on another layer of paint. He was not precious about it. And we can kind of trace back what colors the reds were and the whites and the blacks because they were fairly standard at that time. And so when you have that kind of knowledge about the artist and their desires for the appearance of their works as they live on and on outdoors, I wouldn't hesitate to repaint a Calder because we pretty much know what color to use, and we know that the artist would expect that. At that point, you're going to repaint when the paint has deteriorated so much that it's actually going to be porous, it's going to start flaking, it's going to start corroding the metal underneath, and once you get that, you get some damage to the structure. A lot of the metal sculptures that are painted, they're welded, and the weld seams are going to be weak. And so if you let that corrode, then they're going to structurally get unstable.
Oh.
The coatings are protecting the metal, basically. They're not just color.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But then
yeah.
can you put a protective coating over the paint, like a sealer or a varnish?
Yes, exactly. No, you can do that. And it will help prolong, but it can also make it more difficult to actually repaint in the future because you have more layers that you have to deal with. It's a balancing act with coatings outdoors, definitely.
Yeah. And I've always been curious, like when objects are sensitive to light. And the idea is that the light is actually damaging, right? It's deflating the color or coloring the paper, or the light is affecting the object in some sort of way. Is that cumulative forever, or does any object sort of restore itself?
Oh, so interesting that you would ask that. Because in fact, we're thinking about this right now with our furniture collection. Pretty much it is cumulative. And you probably heard from my colleagues at the Getty Research Institute about fading and how you can even kind of measure that speed depending on what material or what paint. But for some materials, there's a point where it fades to a certain extent and then it just stops. So actually, the light might not be an issue at that point. But when is that point, So with furniture in our collection at the museum, there's a lot of marquetry, the veneer of woods that are glued onto the top of a surface of furniture. And it's just thin veneers of wood that have been cut into shapes and kind of put together like a puzzle to create images, floral things maybe. And so each little piece of wood can be dyed a different color.
Oh, yeah.
You can create kind of a colored appearance using this technique.
I've seen this like in marble tables too. It's like inlay. Is that another?
Yes.
That's another. Okay.
Inlay, yes. And with marble, it's pietre dure, where you cut different types of marble and then assemble them to make an image. And it's really beautiful. It's amazing. I wish I could do that myself, actually.
I mean, you still have time.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. Back with marquetry.
Yeah. So, the dyes that are used for marquetry, they fade. But when they get to a certain point, they stop. And so a lot of the works in our collection, they're all pretty monochrome. So you can still see, say, a floral scene, but then there's not a lot of color. And so at that point, it's not as critical. It's the color's been lost. And it's very rare for dyed wood to maintain their color in perpetuity. So
I mean, it's a natural object, right? Like that is the cellulose in the wood.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. And then are you finding that there are new technologies that are helping you understand the fading of color or the process of decay?
Yes. It's not something that is my specialty, but I know that in particular paintings, or sorry, well, paintings, but also paper conservators spend a lot of time using microphadometry. It's a technique that is used where you're kind of testing with just a tiny laser point of light the speed of fading on an object, and then you're able to then calculate how long it'll be until it fades. And I don't use this technique myself very often, but it can be used. We have used it on our collection of tapestries at the museum because the colors there, in particular the reds, will fade. And so the question is, well, is there, in our collection, have they faded to what they're going to, or are they going to continue? We can actually do that microphadometry in different parts of the tapestry and just get a better idea of what's happening. It's not easy, but it is something it's a tool that conservators have.
Is temperature also a tool?
Like
how you store the object?
I think if you were going to pick anything, it would be cold. So, with temperature, you're going to have more chemical reactions and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, photographs at the Getty Museum are stored in pretty much a room that's a freezer, it feels like. So low temperatures and lower humidity in the air. So we definitely have different kind of environments for different types of works. I work with marbles, and that's going to be less sensitive to temperature and humidity. So that really, and light. So,
but marbles are definitely more sensitive to our fingers, groping them.
They are. They can get dirty and stain from that. Definitely. And a lot of my work is actually cleaning marbles that do get handled too much.
Interesting. One question is, what are some of the challenges that you encounter in your work as a conservator?
Oh, yes. Challenges are everywhere. I mean, the first thing that pops in my mind with that, because of course we're trying to preserve the art and trying to avoid any damage happening. In my work, in a museum that has a very active exhibition program, we're shipping art all of the time. So for us, one of the challenges is really making sure that we are borrowing or sending off collections that won't get damaged in shipment. So there's a whole challenge of even making sure that the type of crates that are used will protect a work. So that's one of the big challenges. In fact, most of the damages that happen to art is in transit. It's when it's traveling or when someone's handling it. So those are some of the big challenges.
I remember the first time I learned about something called an art courier.
Ah, yes. Well, there are couriers, and the reason for that is to really...
Wait, can you explain to our listeners what that is?
Yes. So when a museum, say like the Getty, is going to lend something to another institution, we will send a courier along with it sometimes, not always. But if it's a fragile work, what we will do is that the courier will travel with the crate. It will watch the crate get packed up for the plane cargo area. We fly with the crate. We watch it.
Wait.
What?
So, like you're on the tarmac?
Kinda, yeah.
Like you go to LAX and they let you downstairs and you go onto the runway and watch your crate go on?
Not so much that.
Okay.
We do go into the cargo area and watch them kind of palletize them with all the, they don't just take a forklift and put it on the plane. They actually kind of pack it up into things. And so you watch that all happen, but then it's a security guard that's actually on the tarmac, but calling you, you're on the phone, you're like, okay, it's going up. Okay, it's in. This is the bay it's in. And then you get on the plane, so.
And can you watch this from
Yes. Yeah.
So you're like.
I'm at the gate and I'm watching it go in. And it's like, it's kind of silly at that point because what am I going to do? being so far away.
Well, I mean, you're bearing witness, right?
Exactly.
Like you're eyes on the prize. Like,
Right.
you know exactly where it is. You've seen it handled.
Yeah.
They didn't drop it.
But it's also when it arrives, making sure it gets put away safely, and then the courier will return the next day and then do the unpacking, uncrating, and the installation work. And this is important when a sculpture is particularly fragile, or maybe it ships in several different pieces that it get assembled. So the courier is just really acting as a caretaker for that work from the minute it leaves the museum till the minute it's installed in a new one.
So are there different types of couriers? Like a courier, is it always a conservator?
No. Absolutely not. Sometimes it's an art handler. Other times it could be a curator. It varies. And I think the people that do it the most in museums are the registrars. Yeah, it could be several different types of specialties that go out and do that.
That's so fascinating. I mean, it always blows my mind how many people are involved in exhibitions. Like when I go to a museum and I see a show, I'm just walking through and I'm like, oh my God, that's so cool. And look at this and look at this. And now like really digging in and finding out all of these different parts involved just for like the care and maintenance of one object. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I think you said in your first episode, Kim, that installations for you as an artist are exhausting mentally, physically, right?
Yeah.
And so same with me as a conservator, when we're installing, it's exhausting. There's so much to consider. There's so much work, and it's just constant go, go, go. But then the result is just something amazing that visitors can come see, and they don't have to know how it happened. They just see it for what it is, and it's really rewarding for that.
All right, one more dumb question. I promise this will be the end. Conservation versus restoration.
Yes. So conservation to me is this broad term that I am trained in, where I can just look at the big picture. Conservation is not just sitting at a desk and doing some cleaning of an object. It involves the aspect of collections care, knowing the materials in your collection, making sure the environment is good, making sure there's a integrated pest management program, which we call IPM. And it's just making sure that we keep...
No moths in your sweaters?
No moths, yes. No moths, no
silverfish,
mice.
I'm just thinking of all of the things I have to deal with in my own little life.
Exactly. Yes. So technical studies of artwork and then authentication, that's another aspect of my work. Whereas restoration, that tends to just point to one aspect of the conservation field, and that's the more interventive aspect, where you're actually doing something to restore the work. You're either gluing something back together that's broken into many pieces, or you're cleaning a surface that's stained from years and years of tobacco smoke in the room, or...
Right, back when people smoked in museums.
Yes. So it's really more of a, making a change somehow to the work to either improve its appearance, restore its appearance. And that whole area is another big challenge as well, is knowing how far to go, knowing if you're misinterpreting maybe the artist's wishes or intent and going too far.
Oh, yeah. A lot of us contemporary artists really are into decay.
Yeah.
We're good with it falling apart.
Yes.
But then the question, like when somebody used something like cardboard as a surface.
Yeah.
That's
right.
a pretty, that was never meant to be a long-term situation.
Exactly. But it wasn't important to the artist, perhaps, at the time. It was more just...
Or the material itself, that cardboard is the common thing. You can go, next to the grocery store and find a lot of it.
Yeah.
That is a sort of common material. And then it probably just makes a pretty big puzzle for the long-term care.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We had an exhibition of Twombly, whose sculptures were in the show. And, his works were just so fragile. I feel like if you breathed on them, the powder would just float in the air. And he wanted it. He wanted it to look ancient, even though it's not.
Mm.
And so you kind of have to preserve that ancient quality, and yet you still need to be able to move it around and clean it. But how do you clean something that's so fragile? And so, yeah, there are challenges to preserving materials that aren't meant to be long lasting.
And in that situation, how would you replicate the look?
Right.
Like Nancy Graves.
Well, I've worked on some of her work that's outdoors, cast bronze, I believe, and then painted with, again, like probably polyurethane paints, colored.
Polyurethane paint, layman term?
Car paint.
Car paint.
Yeah.
Okay.
Different colors and kind of just in a scribbly fashion with brushes. And to recreate something like that, it would be like trying to recreate a Jackson Pollock,
Oh, yeah. You would actually have to physically repaint it, like millimeter by millimeter.
Yes. Right. And that is a huge challenge. And I've never had to do that yet. It's just been so focused on really trying to keep it on the surface for as long as you can. And so, yeah, those are some things that are going to become real challenges for people, conservators in the future.
Conservators of the future, that's a great note to end on. Our listeners might know this by now, but we have a question that we bring back to each guest at the end of the episode. So feel free to be as expansive as you want. Very open-ended, so answer it however you want. And here's the question. What project would you do if you had unlimited funding and time?
This is a completely unrealistic question.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
And there's so many ways.
Blue sky all the way.
I know, and you can approach it in different ways. You can fantasize, or you can be selfish, or you can...
Or you could dodge it like you're doing right now.
Yes, I'm getting somewhere.
Okay, bring it on.
But realistically, I feel like if I had all the money in the world and the time, I would just constantly try and take the money from the billionaires who are selfish and using their money for their own purpose. I want to take it and funnel it. And I just want it all to go to education and the arts. And just really, I feel like I would be so laser focused on just making sure that we just start to make sure every aspect of our life involves education and community and consideration for our environment. And I know it's very abstract what I'm saying, but I don't know how I would do it. But I feel like money needs to be refunneled somehow, and our focus needs to be on us as individuals, understanding each other, and learning constantly. In fact, another fantasy would be that I would just travel the world and just explore different cultures and things forever, because I think that's just we're so thankful to have all of this diversity out there. And I think that's probably what I would do.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
I know.
Oh my God, I love it.
Good.
Oh, thank you so much, Julie. This was such a pleasure.
Yes, I really enjoyed it. Thank you. And of course, if I had all the money in the world, I would donate to Now Be Here.
Oh, love it. Oh, love it.
Yeah, you guys are fantastic. You're amazing.
Oh,
so thank you for all of your work. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's good.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up and say our thank yous. Thank you again to Julie Wolfe for coming on the podcast. Mm-hmm. And thank you to Sky Park Tausig for being our amazing producer, Taras Matla and the University of Maryland Art Gallery, and Jonathan Furmansky for letting us use your music. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and thanks again to Julie for joining the podcast today. We'll be back in 2 weeks.
We are The Art Equation. You can find us wherever you listen every other Thursday.
Thanks for being here with us. We'd really love to hear your thoughts. So please subscribe. And if you have a moment to leave a review, it really helps us out. We love the feedback. Talk to you soon here on The Art Equation. The Art Equation is a podcast from Now Be Here with support from the University of Maryland Art Gallery. Now Be Here is a directory and resource created by and for women and non-binary artists. You can find more information at www.nowbehereart.com.
Oh, you really want me to really talk and blah 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 blah.
Yeah, like blah 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 blahs.
Blah 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 blah
Blah blah blah. That was
I feel
perfect.
like this is reminding me of my gig days where you're testing a microphone and
Oh my God. I always
remember?
forget that you're like a retired rock star.
Oh, that sounds so lovely. Yes.
Among all the hats you wear. Oh my God.
So now we have some more steps in instruction.
You mean beyond like go to this website and cross your fingers and clap for Tinkerbell? Like,
right. Sometimes that just doesn't work.
Tink really let us down.
I know.